Hi everybody, it's Katherine Byers, Chief Stripe Changer with Arbez, and I'm here today to talk to you about scope creep. It's one of the worst things that can happen to you as a consultant, and it's one of the most common things to happen. You've got to see it coming, be ready for it, and know how to manage it. So let me walk you through 6 warning signs that scope creep is on its way, and then some great strategies to prevent it and handle it when it happens. Let's get started. All right, first of all, 6 signs that scope creep is headed your way. Number 1, squishy requirements, no detailed project plan. Basically, you need a detailed project plan. If you don't have one, it's really hard for you to hold yourself and your client responsible for the scope, size, complexity of the project, deadlines, all of that. Number 2, a project that has been underestimated. If you get on site, you step into the project and you realize, wow, this is much more complex than I expected. You better stop, renegotiate, readdress it, and figure out what to do with your client. This happens all the time. Number 3, an inexperienced client. So if you're dealing with a client who is hiring a consultant for the very first time, that's a warning sign. Or if your client has never handled a project this large and scary. A classic example is mergers and acquisitions. All of a sudden, their company goes from a small pond, they're a big fish in a small pond, to a small fish in a huge pond, and that can be a recipe for a lot of scope creep and a lot of pain and suffering. Number 4, minimal stakeholder involvement. It is critical that during the discovery process, when you're leading up to crafting the project plans, signing on the contract's dotted line, you've got to make sure the stakeholders are engaged. I recently got a call from one of our consulting students who said he was meeting with a company. He'd been working with the VP of HR to go in and do culture work and a reorg. And she sent him a contract and wanted him to start in 2 weeks, but he hadn't met the 2 owners yet. And I said, stop, don't do it. They are the key stakeholders. They hold the keys to the kingdom. It's their business. It's their baby. It's their money. You can't possibly agree to do a project on culture change and business process improvement unless the 2 owners of that small firm are in the room. So that's an example. You've got to make sure leading into it that the right decision makers have been around the table and have shaped the project and signed off on what you're coming in to do. And you need to make sure they're fully engaged moving forward, not on a daily basis, but on a regular basis, reviewing your work, resetting, those sorts of things. All right, number 5, sign that scope creep is on its way is communication is difficult. It's usually difficult during the hiring process, and that carries on to the project. That is a warning sign that you might be in trouble and scope creep might be heading your way. Number 6, when you run into problems on a project early on, and you're trying to alert your client to the risk and they don't want to hear about it, that's a major red flag, and it's a sign that you could not only have scope creep happening, but you could end up with a massive project failure and you could be in a no-win situation. So these are clear warning signs. These are extreme situations. They do happen, but it's usually a lot more nuanced than this. It's your job. It's your job to prevent the scope creep. What does scope creep look like? It looks like you sign up to do a certain job, 20, 30, 40 hours a week, and all of a sudden you're saying yes to things like, could you quickly look into this for me? What do you think about just adding this to the requirements quickly? Nothing is quick. You need to take a deep breath and smile and say, I'd be happy to take a look at that. Let me figure out what that's going to do to the project timeline, scope, and cost. That'll wake them up. All right. So those are the warning signs. Let me talk about 6 ways to prevent and manage scope creep. Number 1, charge enough money. You got to make sure you're charging enough money so that you're not getting paid for the work that you're doing. You're getting paid for the value that you're providing so that you can catch the problems before they happen, all right? So charge enough money. Ensure your price is enough that you don't start to feel resentful and, when you run into communication challenges and things like that. So this is the biggest way to blow up on projects is you underbuild yourself and you resent the client and you don't have the energy to get in and do the tough stuff, which is resetting expectations, managing expectations, that sort of a thing. Charge enough money. Charge them what you're worth. Number 2, start with a solid detailed project plan. A well-defined project plan is your best defense against scope creep and project failure. Number 3, set clear and measurable objectives. This is kissing cousins to number 2. Your project plan and your statement of work need to have very clear articulation of the work that you are coming in to do, milestone metrics, who on the client team is going to be involved, what are they going to provide to you. Very often, you need confidential insider reports, data, feedback, and if you're not getting from that from the client team, you're going to miss your deadlines. So very clear articulation of the work, milestones, deadlines, that sort of thing. How's the success of this project going to be measured? Number 4, start strong and you will succeed, usually. A project kickoff meeting is absolutely critical. In that meeting, you're going to find out what's changed. Your last meeting may have been 2 weeks ago and you wouldn't think much has changed. You'd be surprised how much can change in 2 weeks. Walk through the contract, the project plan, make sure nothing's changed in terms of priorities, players, maybe the key stakeholder quit, you just don't know. Revisit the project plan, revisit expectations, and set up lines of communication. I highly recommend weekly status reports, and in the beginning, weekly meetings over the phone, in person, high touch in the beginning, and then in the end, a few weeks in, you need very little hand holding, but it's really critical to get that feedback early and often in the beginning to make sure you're delivering as promised and as they wish so that you can handle hiccups right away. You know why? Bad news does not get better with time. Number 5, expect the unexpected and look for trouble. I've been teaching my oldest son how to drive, and this is the lesson that I've been trying to teach him is you need to anticipate the bad drivers. You need to think worst case scenario. If this guy who just came zooming up on my tail end, what's he gonna do? And if he does that, am I gonna be ready for it? And sure enough, yesterday on the highway, some dude came zooming up right on our tail, and I sat there quietly to let my son figure out what to do. And instead of moving over so the guy could zoom past him, he stayed where he was and got a little bit irritated. And the guy went zooming around him and then zoomed back in front of him with 3 feet to spare between his rear bumper and our front bumper. I think from now on, my son is going to anticipate that and drop back and be ready for that kind of behavior. Same thing on a project. It's up to you, the consultant, to look for problems before they happen. Number 6, I've mentioned communication. When your client comes to you and says, hey, can you quickly look at this? Would you mind adding this to that set of requirements? Stop, take a deep breath, smile, and say, I'd be happy to look at that. Give me a day. Let me think about this and figure out what this new requirement is going to do to the project scope, timeline, and cost, because I'm probably going to have to add in some hours, which is going to cost you more money. That's going to wake the client up. Now, if it's a fixed bid project, then it's a similar discussion, and you say, I'd be happy to add that. It's going to push the deadline, and it's going to cost more money. I'll have to add to the original proposal and contract. How do you feel about that? Happy to draw up a new statement of work? How do you feel about push deadlines, additional cost, and or pushing some other things back so that we can get this thing done right away? It's a conversation. It's open lines of communication with your client, but it is on your shoulders to manage it. If you wait for your client to manage a scope creep, it's just not going to happen. All right, thanks for tuning in. I hope you found this really helpful to help you be incredibly successful out there to become a highly paid, highly coveted consultant. Have a great rest of your day.